What's up, everybody? We are back for another episode of Digital Banter. As you can see, we've got a little bit of a unique setup piloting it today where James and I are in the same room. So those that are catching the audio version of this, just so you guys know, we do stream this live every single episode. So for the video visuals, and for today, we're going to be doing some definite video visuals. Check out the Dragon 360 LinkedIn page where you can catch all the video versions of this. But on today's episode, it's just James and I, and we are kind of doing a semi AMA around the core topic of should I be running ads? Now, this is your brainchild as an episode, so why don't you set it up a little bit?
Yeah, so this is really, he said an AMA. I mean, if you guys have questions, definitely throw them in the chat. On our end, I'm not going to lie, we have a list of frequently asked questions that we get, and I think it'd just be helpful for us to go through it. Honestly, the other thing, we're winging this setup for the first time, so you'll notice we don't have a guest this week. I wouldn't want to bring a guest on for our first episode of the new setup. Who knows? We were just messing with the mics for 20 minutes, trying to make sure. Actually, I think we were in here messing with the setup for longer than 20 minutes. So if anybody's trying this for the first time, let me know. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, we are a paid media agency, and what we deal with all the time is like people who are trying to add paid media to their marketing mix and trying to figure out if it's the right fit for them. And the reality of the situation that we find all the time is that, paid ads isn't for every business. It isn't for every company. And I think that in our experience, we're at the point now where we can be honest with people if something's not going to work before it even starts. But we're going to go through some of those questions today. So to kick it off, the first question, I always find this one pretty interesting. And that comes down to, what are the toughest industries to run ads for? Digital, just for the record, we're talking digital ads, not print, nothing like that.
All right. So define difficult, though.
Honestly, hard to reach your target audience, how to kind of convey the products. I mean, think about it this, what do we find in our experience of the most difficult ones to run for? I mean, I'm thinking of, I can think of a couple off the bat and I'll get into them. Some of them not necessarily B2B focused, but costs are too high, it's too competitive.
Well, that's what I was asking, because if you go cost wise, legal is far and away number one, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it depends on who your audience is, because that's really the meat of it all, regardless of cost. Does your audience actually hang out online, or do they still go old school and just read publications, listen to the radio, and pretty much just hang around in their cars or drive around?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned old school. The main, we're B2B focused, right? And, there are B2B companies right now who are working on getting their first website and trying to sell products online. That's still, it's still out there, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think that some of the biggest difficulties lie. In my experience, manufacturing products are the most difficult. Not manufacturing SaaS, that is different. I'm talking if you are trying to sell some large piece of machinery.
Sure. Okay.
Right. And, because sell it that is an industry where the trade shows still, you're not going to be able to show, I don't think about it as a huge machine that takes up the size of this office that's made for pouring plastic resin into boats. I don't know, making something up, right? Being able to spec that out and explain all the details in a digital format is kind of hard.
Yeah, but okay, so this goes back to my post today that led off for kicking off this episode is, paid isn't right for everyone, but it's also based off of what you have to work with and how you're thinking about it. Just given your situation of what you described, okay, yes, traditional digital advertising in a lead gen model does not make sense based off of what you're selling and who you're selling to. But I can guarantee there's still a digital avenue to take by taking video, getting in front of people, and playing a halo effect for all the SDR outreach that's happening for those large ticket items. There's still a paid digital version of that.
Yeah, I think it's hard to visualize. Like, think about this. Like, if it's a product that you need to like touch and feel and use, and like, I think that is hard to portray, right? Like, if we're talking about SaaS is like probably one of the easiest things because you can easily.
I don't know about that. You still have to know what the hell you're selling and how you're selling it.
Yeah, but you can get them into a demo that is going to allow them to have a hands-on experience with the product, right? So like, what's everybody talking about in SaaS? Like, show me the product, show me the product, show me the product, right? Like, you can't show somebody the giant piece of machinery that pours resin, right? Like, it's very hard to do that. I mean, like you said, video, yeah, there are some cool things that you can do there, but to think about taking somebody through like a full funnel experience through advertising, I think that's difficult.
Sure. Okay. Well, let's stick on the SaaS route then, right? So there's everything from seed stage, startup, bootstrap, Kickstarter, whatever you want to call it, all the way up to enterprise behemoths, right? What is the right, and this goes into the next stage, the question that we always get is like, when is paid right for me based off of my growth stage?
So this one's interesting because it depends on what this truly depends on like what you're trying to achieve, right? If you're a pre-product market fit startup, you can run ads. It's if you're trying to run ads to try to get customers at a certain CPA, then yeah, you're probably doing the wrong thing.
Right.
If you are trying to learn something really quickly, like, hey, we feel like we might have product market fit with this persona, and this persona. Okay, let's run ads across those three personas and see which one that we should kind of narrow in on to get things started. Like, you're going to be able to learn a lot faster with ads than you are, a content marketing channel or like building a community or some of the more organic things that take a lot of time and a lot of work, right? You can pour $20,000 into ads if you have the funding to do so and get the answer to those questions like really fast.
Okay, but in that case, then how are you measuring market fit?
Depends on what your call to action is, right? So like, I think ultimately what you're trying to do is like provide some level of offering, right? So think about I don't know, there's a couple different ways that you could do. There's a lot of like product-led companies. I think that this is probably like a really good fit for, because you can get people will sign up and try something for free, right?
Sure. Okay.
And you can be able to gauge their level of engagement of whatever free version of the software you're doing and kind of have that be like the primary CTA and test it across all of them. I mean, there are other things where you can maybe come up with some other sort of like value add offering, and just get the level of engagement based on that. But like, even like, so that's on your website, probably more of the business inline metrics, but also just like looking at ad engagement and like, do people actually care what you have to say?
Yeah, because I mean, there's been plenty of times where I get leads that come in to us that want to run pilots at like $1,000 just to see if paid works for them. But the way they're going about measuring it is, oh, well, what's the revenue that's going to come out of that?
Yeah.
Both based off of that amount of money and lack of readiness for paid, like that's a losing strategy at the end of the day. And that's where I was going with how are you going to measure market fit, because it's very different than if you are paid ready and ready to scale revenue.
It's all about what you're trying, like what are you trying to learn, right? If you're that early on, the whole thing has to be what you're trying to learn. It's kind of like Dave Ramsey, right? So Dave Ramsey financially talks about like when it's okay for you to buy a boat, right? And he's like, if you can take that money and you can put it on the floor and set it on fire, then you can do it. So it all depends on like where you're at financially too, right? Like,
have you and Jen actually done that? Have you set your money on fire before you've bought one of your boats?
But if there's if you are trying to bootstrap your startup, that's probably not. If you are doing a spin-off of a larger company that is already successful and you have the funding to do it, or you have a couple $1 million in funding, like you can do those types of things because you want to learn and you want to learn fast.
Sure. Okay. All right. So what budget does somebody need to do that?
Oh boy, this is a tough one. So I'll put it this way. A $500 test you want to dabble and try something is never going to be worth your time. Right. And I think that that's the thing that we get all the time. This is more from like, I don't think that we get a lot of companies who are just saying like, oh, I want to spend like $1,000 and like run ads for the first time. I think that we get this more with like clients who just want to test a new channel, right? Like, hey, like we can't just take $1,000 out of your $20,000 budget and put it towards YouTube or put it towards Facebook. Like that's not really, to me, like that's not really a valid test, and it's like hard to learn anything with that data. So going back to it, like how do you establish what the budget is? The factors that you need to consider are like, one, like what are you actually trying to learn, and what do you need to get? I'm not going to say statistically significant data because that always ends up being a big number, but enough data to get you the answers that you're looking for. I mean, if I was to throw a dollar amount out there, like I would start any test with like $2,000-$3,000 as a test.
But what kind of test? Is it a test of an expansion of existing strategy into a channel, or is it a pilot?
So this would be like an initial startup pilot. Like, hey, I'm running ads for the first time. Like, what is the budget that I should set aside to actually get some sort of proof of concept going, right? Like you're not going to get, like I said, you're not going to get a proof of concept with $500. But there's so many, like, I'm throwing out numbers when I probably shouldn't. I should probably be answering it like every other marketer and says that it depends. Because it does. It depends on your market size. It depends on the competition. It depends on the average cost per click. But my point is that if you're just trying to like dabble and, spend the amount of money that you spent writing a blog post, running ads, like it's not going to work for you.
So I disagree on one of the things that you mentioned as far as like channel expansion and a couple thousand or even, less than that not being a worthwhile pilot. I think it depends on what you're currently running and whether that expansion just plays into what you already have versus creating net new. The point, though, at the end of the day is you can't measure an expansion in the same way that your operational strategy is already working. In that case, you are talking about measuring, does our audience hang out there? Are they engaging? Are they engaging in the right way? And is there incremental reach and impact that we can get by continuing on this channel? You can't measure it the same way, though.
Yeah, I think it depends on the channel too, right? Like YouTube, like I feel like this is the one that we get the most often. Like, oh, hey, let's test YouTube. Like in the context that we usually get this in is, we have clients that are focused on bottom of the funnel activities. They're trying to drive demos, they're trying to drive trials, they're trying to drive leads. And then they say, hey, let's add YouTube, which is like more of a top of funnel awareness, demand gen channel that, they think that they are going to be able to track, to your point, the same way that they're tracking their LinkedIn lead gen ads or paid search or something like that. That is, having a much more immediate impact on revenue.
So the other thing here that I want to address in a rant, I think, is how a existing piece of content or asset or campaign is not just let's take this, throw it on, let's say YouTube, and see if it works. And the reason I say that is because, number one, for whomever's managing it, whether it's agency or an internal person, you are adding now another channel to the mix that has its own targeting, that has its own reporting, that has its own everything. And it's not just like, oh yeah, here's another channel, let's try it out. Like, no, there is an actual level of work that goes into that extends and expands the responsibilities of the individuals or team managing that.
Hang on, let's this is fun. I would love to get anybody's feedback on this, because this is a debate that we have all the time when it comes to like our actual pricing and how that goes, right? So like as an agency, our pricing is channel agnostic, meaning that like our pricing is based on your budgeted ad spend and has nothing to do with the amount of channels that you're on. So, right. So you would pay the same if all of your ad spend is on LinkedIn versus if it was scattered across 5 different channels. We do that because we think that it's very important for our clients to be able to be flexible and not feel like it's an upsell if they want to like test a new channel or try something different.
Or if we propose testing, not just if they want to test.
Exactly. Now, it is twice as much work to manage Google search, and LinkedIn at the same in comparison to managing one channel. And every channel that you add significantly increases the amount of work. And not only does it increase the amount of work because you're managing different channels and people have different skill sets between paid search and paid social, the reporting tools also become a royal pain in the ass when you want to add certain channels, because Reddit doesn't, you want to, okay, so you want to run your $500 Reddit test, right? Like Reddit doesn't integrate with all of the reporting aggregation tools. So you want to see that Reddit spend all rolled up nice and pretty next to your other spends. And the truth is like, that's a lot of manual work and it sucks. So anybody who, the debate is always like channel-based pricing or all-inclusive. I feel like everybody wants all-inclusive. I just want to let you know that there's a story behind it.
All right, let's try and bring this back.
Our ad's good for you. Okay.
Let's try and bring this back. Yeah. So, okay, if we decide as a business that yes, we want to do something with ads, well, how do we figure out where to start from a channel perspective? And is that the right place to start?
The right place to start? The right place to start is with audience and your audience research, and what channels your audience hangs out on comes through that audience research. And I mean, truthfully, so like all of your audience research should be based on customers. If you're an early on startup, like interviewing people who are actually in the market and trying to figure out, who that ideal, you can really want to boil it down to 2 things. You want to have your ICP, ideal customer profile. That's more like the type of companies that you want to work with, and then break it down into the personas from there. And then, from the persona perspective, we like to break things down even further than that between like essentially who's the champion in the deal and then who is the rest of the buyer's committee. Mm-hmm. And that really weighs into like the type of content that you're going to end up serving to them later on. So think about it this way. If you're like the champion in the deal, like you care about a lot different things than the buyer's committee, right? So like, hey, if I am, I'm involved in managing day-to-day LinkedIn ads, there's a new like AI creative thing that's going to make our creative team's job easier. Like that's cool. That's going to help the people on the creative team. It's going to make their jobs easier. Andy, the CEO, is the one who actually has to sign off on the expense and justify whether or not the time saved is going to equate the value that you're paying, right? So like the messaging for those is going to be different. So anyways, that's kind of how you want to break down your audience. And once you have like those personas mapped out, then each individual channel, how you go about deciding whether or not that's the right channel, that is kind of differs per platform. Like LinkedIn Sales Nav is a great tool to see whether or not people are active. Each tool has its own audience research tool built in where you can essentially build out the audiences based on the personas that you have, and it'll give you the estimated size and some level of information around their engagement.
So what you're saying is like shouldn't just take $1,500, throw it at ads and see if it works.
Not without some research.
Okay. Well, there's answer number 1 to should I run ads, and problem number 1 of if you are choosing to do that without doing your audience research, right?
Yeah, I mean that's one of the most common things that we see when we're like auditing accounts is they have a feeling of who their audience is. They group them all together, right? So like you have, I've seen people targeting like procurement in their ads, right? Because, we deal with procurement people when they're signing off on the product, right? Like that's not like part of your target audience, and that person does not care about the same things that the person's actually going to use it to. But like grouping all of those together and then, spending $1,500 and realizing like you didn't learn anything from it because the level of audience segmentation that you did like wasn't good enough.
So I think the other thing too, beyond audience, is understanding what your go-to-market motion is and how you actually convert opportunities and anything into business. And that should decide and help define where your channel strategy lies. And by that, I mean is if you have a multi-person SDR team that's going to actively go out there, nurture leads, really work the phones, the emails, things like that. Okay, well, that's going to allow you to support a little bit more of a larger scale content strategy where you can work various types of leads versus a founder led or PLG kind of motion where you just got to get somebody into the product, into a demo, and convert them out of there. And I think those types of conversations and thought processes ultimately lead you into understanding, well, if I need to show value and impact up front versus over the course of time and needing to feed a sales team, that decides whether you're going to go multi-channel or single channel out of the gate too.
I mean, the big thing that tells me is like what format your content needs to be in, right? So like I think it still is a debate because I'll tell you the exact reason why right now, like gated content versus ungated content, right? Like if you were trying to push leads to an outbound motion, like you want to have a gated content strategy, right? Mm-hmm. Like, because no matter what people say, like somebody who saw an ad, visited your website, and downloaded your content is a better lead than somebody that you just downloaded off of a list because they showed some level of intent and some level of engagement with your brand versus someone who may have no idea who you are. So there's value in that. And I think that, if you do have like the appropriate lead scoring system in place, you can create warmer leads for an outbound motion. If you have just a smaller sales team and all they want to do is demos, like, no, you shouldn't be calling your gated content leads and asking them to do a demo, like, pushing them right down through the bottom, right? Like that's where you do want to have more of a, you're only gating your, whatever your bottom of funnel CTA is, talk to sales, get a demo, get a trial.
So then what content do I need to be successful if I decide to spin up ads?
Spin up ads. All right. So, well, this is going to get complicated because we have a whole framework for it.
Keep it simple.
I'm going to keep it simple for just getting started. Because a future episode will kind of go through like paid content strategy in detail. But in order to get things going, the main a high level overview of a paid media strategy is you have two functions. You want to build and engage an audience and then convert that audience. So there's really two types of content that need to do that. Starting with audience, we talked about champions versus buyer committee. If you're started, the first campaigns that you should be running should be focused on whoever your champion in the deal is, whoever the end user is, because you need content that is going to resonate with them first. If you are a marketing SaaS product, like you are not targeting CMOs to start. You are targeting the person who is actually going to use it, the social media marketing manager, the influencer manager, like whatever that, like that's the difference, right? So the first content that you need to create needs to be some level of some content that's going to create an emotional response with the end user of the product. So think about this, like what you're trying to do is you're trying to add value and then tie it back to the solution, right? So there's the first content that you want to have wants to focus on like what their actual pain points are, right? So like, I was looking at something the other day. It's an influencer management platform. And essentially what they're doing is they're spending what influencer managers are doing is spending a ton of time tracking and managing influencers. They have 500 influencers. They're managing it all in a spreadsheet, right? So what does that mean? That means the pain point for them is they're on Instagram on the weekends trying to check and see if these people posted, right? Like what a pain in the ass that is, right? So that's like a pain point that, quite frankly, like maybe your boss doesn't really care that you're like working weekends and like trying to just track this one thing. So like you need to create content that resonates with that person first. And then, if you have a longer sales cycle, then you can get in the rest of the buyers committee, add things like social proof and like case studies and things like that.
I think the big thing there is you're trying to really understand the champion and connect with the champion, because the TLD version of that is they are your advocate. They are the ones that are going to push hard or just balk and stand down if they get pushback from the person signing off on it. Like if you come to me with something, obviously I'm going to ask, how much does it cost? What's it doing? Is it valuable and not? Right. And if you don't feel like it's valuable enough to impact you personally, you're not going to fight for that versus something that damn well is something that's going to change you and the agency. You're going to push hard at me for that. And the same thing goes for anything out there, whether that's a D2C item that is between you and your wife or you and your partner. If it's B2B and you have to go up to the CIO or CTO and push hard as the manager of information systems or IT architects or anything like that, like that CIO, CTO does not give a crap unless you're going to come to them with a solution that makes sense for you and ultimately the business.
Absolutely.
All right. So before we get into the fun part of today's episode, I do want to ask you, going back to this channel thing, do you run banners?
Just like display ads?
Banners. Do banners work?
In my opinion, no.
Okay. I mean, I'm asking because in some people's minds, that is a cost-effective measure, because if you're looking at reach metrics or CPM or impressions as a metric of success, there's a inherent flawed aspect to that.
The reality is that's not like a metric of success.
Yes.
Like even if you're doing like a brand campaign, like you should be looking at measuring things like brand lift, brand recall, like shit like that, not CPM impressions. Like CPM is you get what you pay for, right?
Right.
Like that's there is no negotiating with the ad platforms. I mean, there are some things that you can do with programmatic banners by negotiating deals and stupid shit like that, but like, I don't know, waste of time.
Okay.
It's a waste of time in the B2B space. My D2C experience is not where it used to be. So I'm not going to make any claims.
Fair enough. All right. So now for our last segment of today, you're the one that put this together as far as an idea is concerned. So you started off.
All right. So this one, I'll be honest, we're winging this for the first time. So both Andy and I have chosen some B2B technology startup. Each of us has $3,000 in spend to kind of put together a little strategy for each of these clients. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring up each of their websites on the screen here. And Andy pulled one for me. I pulled one for him. We have $3,000 to spend. What are you doing? What are you trying to learn? Essentially, where are you starting? How do you approach audience research? Pick whatever we want. Go through it, and we'll go from there.
All right. Who's going first?
Oh, Ian, my link is in the document. Ian is the producer. All right. Ian, maybe you can find this as we go. So I'll do mine first. So I chose a company called Arrow. I actually think it's a pretty big tech startup.
Yes, it's.
Yeah. Anyways, listen, I was going through Crunchbase just looking at startups, but Arrow, I have not heard of you. So they are pretty big. But Arrow is an AI-powered B2B SaaS platform that automates social media content creation and management for businesses. With features like ready-to-use posts, custom content channels, and dedicated user success managers, Arrow helps busy professionals seamlessly post engaging content, grow their following, and build credibility. So a pretty large audience, if you ask me.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, there's a couple different ways to look at that. I mean, where I start is what does their go-to-market motion look like? What is the thing that hands off to sales, and how are sales conducted? And I know Ian's going to pull up the website here shortly as soon as he gets it, so that we can kind of see it on the fly. But I think that defines a lot of where I take things next. The second biggest thing there is, I mean, you said it yourself, the audience is massive. It's potentially gigantic as far as a TAM is concerned.
So let's jump into that. It's early on, right? So like I said, this is a bigger company. Say they just started. This is the product they got. Like, what are you trying to learn? You have a TAM like that.
I'm splitting it, and I'm understanding who I'm going after. Am I going after other organizations such as agencies or in-house markets? Right. So business content as a service. I don't even know what that means, but okay. Anyway, maybe we should bring Anthony Perry back on. But there's that side of it, right? And then there's the creator side of it, right?
Yeah.
Where you have potentially a much larger market that is more willing to test and trial something that you probably just spun up as a startup. And I feel like that is probably the better way to go when it comes to initial strategy and paid. And the reason I say that is because number one, you're going to have a larger market to engage with. Number two, in most situations, you're targeting both the champion and the decision maker because they are the same person, because they are the individual.
Yeah, I mean, think about like you want help with your LinkedIn content, right? Like that's. Hey, Ian, I think this might help us with this a little bit. Hit the pricing page. I think that'll give us an idea of like we can narrow that on. Okay, so we got answers right away.
Oh, yeah. I start with creators and individual people, and I understand what they are challenged with when it comes to content and creation, whether it's social or written or visual. And I lean into understanding and developing messaging and creative that appeals to those pain points. Because at the end of the day, their time is limited and they would be maximizing their dollar value through the lens of, if I am charging $2,000 to do XYZ work, I want to do that in the most minimal amount of time possible, because that means I can take on more work as an individual and get paid ultimately more revenue that I'm putting in my pocket. And because of that, and because of that audience, I am going heavy on social. I'm going heavy on TikTok, and I'm going heavy on LinkedIn, depending on where this breaks down from a consumption perspective.
LinkedIn, that's bold at $19. That's 4 clicks, man.
Well, what we don't know here necessarily is the LTV off of a subscription.
Well, it's funny. I was gonna say, obviously you need to validate audiences before you actually run on any of these channels. But I was gonna say, based on your experience, you're winging it. So you get $3,000, right? Like, what channel are you going in on?
I am going
without any audience research at all, for the record, for everybody. No validation.
No validation. You know what I'm doing? I'm going all in on LinkedIn with message ads.
LinkedIn
message
ads.
Because that is how I know I'm going to be reaching the right people and prompting them without relying on them to see me in their feed. And I'm crafting a message that is going to be resonating with them. And I know, based off of who they are and what they do for a living, they hang out on social.
That's fair. I was thinking that I would go, again, no audience research at all, probably all in on like social media managers. Pick a certain company size. Like they're pretty busy people. I mean, this is something that's pretty easy to get signed off. I think like just because I've played around in the space a bit, just looking at like you can target people who are like influencers or trying to create their own content. Like, I don't know. I just don't know how much I believe in like that targeting that's available, like without a list. Like if you're trying to take that more like, I don't know, solopreneur, like founder type. I think that's a more difficult play early on versus, if I'm testing something from scratch, like I know that social media managers are actively doing this every day and trying to create content. And
I mean, you know what I'm not running? I'm not running search. I'm not running YouTube. I'm not running anything on Google.
Really?
I'm not running anything on programmatic.
You're not bidding on content creation AI right now on search?
And paying $20 a click when I have a $19 revenue.
Talk about things that are hard. Like I don't the search AI game. That one's probably tough.
Yeah. So, I mean, without any research, gut feel, throwing it out there, that's what I'm doing off of this.
All right. Sounds good. Let's.
All right. You don't get off as easy for yours.
I don't get. Yeah. I was trying to be nice. Marketing the marketers. He's going to pick. I know. I'm getting a feeling that it's some sort of manufacturing because I said that that's the most difficult space to play in.
All right, Ian, bring up mine. All right. So, yes, we are talking about Canvas GFX, which short version of it is a digital transformation product that allows people, let's say, on the floor of manufacturing plants or in any facilities to visually get their instructions, understand how something works if they need it, and provide feedback digitally so that further instructions, further tutorials, everything that goes into how you operate either a system or a chain or anything like that is modified and updated.
All right, so this is a SaaS product.
Yep.
For manufacturing.
We'll say like, think of it as like floor operations.
All right, so.
Or plant operations if you want to go that route.
Yeah, so IKEA directions for digital IKEA.
Yeah,
digital IKEA directions for, sorry, Canvas, if I'm insulting your brand, this is kind of cool and I can see how it'd be very useful, but.
Yes, and each widget and shows how many dowels you have to insert before you actually do the cam system.
Okay, I mean, that is cool. I think that is definitely a tough one. I'd be curious, do they have anything around like the industries, Canvas, company?
No, I mean, it's kind of a platform with
yeah,
solutions and products built into it.
No pricing. Okay.
No.
I am going to, okay, so it's probably operations people who are managing a manufacturing facility. Job titles, I would have to do the research to actually see like who those people are and whether or not they're on LinkedIn. I will say that I do not, I mean, search is a no. I even think like Facebook, Instagram is probably a no. So I do think that for this to work, LinkedIn is probably going to be your best bet. And I think.
Do you think those people hang out there though?
It's tough. I think that, let me put it this way, because I think the approach is going to have to be like first party data focused, right? I think that, you're going to be able to find like, certain floor manufacturing positions, but yeah, to your point, like I'm not sure if they're, I actually highly doubt that they're kind of active on LinkedIn. That said, like we've managed ads for a similar audience to this before and LinkedIn was successful. So that's really going to depend on like the audience research in the end. But I'm going on LinkedIn and I am doing message ads with an ABM focused strategy.
ABM as far as accounts or contacts?
ABM being, well, depends on what the client has available. I would go with contacts before I would go with.
They got nothing available. Let's put it that way. They have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, we would have to work with them to pull together a company list, work with their sales team, and I would take an ABM approach for this. And I would do ABM through LinkedIn. You only have $3,000. We don't have the money for those expensive platforms.
All right, so I'm going to grill you on that then. So you're going to ask the sales team to give you an account list. Don't you think that's going to be skewed towards who they want to get versus who they can get?
Listen, there's some coaching that happens there for sure. But what do we talk about? Like how marketing and sales should work together where, Kyle was talking about having them sign a contract. Part of that contract should be like, hey, don't come up with crazy lists for your ABM programs. But yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting about this type of company though, that's going to make it like really hard is like, you're not going after a brand, right? Like Nike has hundreds of manufacturing facilities and probably 90% of them are not owned by Nike, right? So you have to be able to find like those individual sub brands of like where those people work and find out essentially like who the owners and who the floor managers are in those companies. And that's where I do think you will have to be careful working with sales, making sure that they're not just giving you Fortune 500 companies and really being able to break down and understand like who they actually work for.
And that's where I was going with, if you're letting sales decide who your targets are, I don't want to go down this rant necessarily where compensation structure, commissions, everything else has an influence on who they are selecting versus what are the, I don't want to call them easy wins, but what are the most realistic wins that you have to gain to going back to what we've talked about throughout this entire episode. What are you trying to learn and measure against?
And while I would love to help them fix that process, that's somebody else's job.
All right. Well, that was interesting. All right.
You had to go manufacturing, didn't you?
I thought it'd be easy for you.
Easy. Yeah, easy. It's because it's the hardest one to run ads in. There's only one thing you can try, and it either works or it doesn't. Or you're just running branded search campaigns and claiming how good they are.
Hey, look, there's nothing wrong with that.
There's definitely something wrong with that.
All right. So as we bring today's episode to a close, I don't know, what would you say our takeaways are of today?
Okay, so first thing, get started. You have to segment your audience. Don't target everybody at once. Like, if you are going to be launching a paid campaign with a limited amount of budget, make sure that you are focused on either learning something about your audience or you have what you feel like is a pretty narrowed down ICP. Step 2, segment between influencers and decision makers not influencers, champions and the buyer's committee when you are doing your personas. And don't loop them all together and create content for each of those personas separately, or else you're just going to be talking to the wrong person.
I think the other thing that was a takeaway today is that this actually didn't go that bad, given our new setup and how we did not have the right equipment necessarily to do it.
And read the comments and everyone's like, is your sound working? James, how come you keep rubbing the microphone on your leg?
Yeah, but you know what it shows to anybody that is listening or watching? You kind of just got to go for it and just see if it works and see if it doesn't. Don't let things get in your way of actually proving that something can be successful, much in the same way that we just talked about paid ads today.
So next week we'll have 2 cameras. We'll be doing split shots between Andy and myself. There will be 3 producers, updated lighting, boom mics.
He's not getting approval for all those expenses. But anyway, thanks again for joining us today. Really appreciate it. Until next time, catch you later.